Welcome to Foreign University Self-Learning Courses. This is Sherry again, and today I'm very honored and glad to have Barry. He's actually our neighbor, which we feel very lucky to have. And his wife, we will also be interviewing with Jess in the next segment. But because they have a 2-year-old, so they need to take turns taking care of their child. And so, Barry, thank you so much for taking this time and really sharing your experiences.
You're welcome.
I wanted to invite you to this interview in particular. It's imagining that when we met with you, you were actually working in a different position than where you're at now. And so I thought that could be something of interest to the students. And so I would love to see if we could welcome you to share around that. First, your previous job, the position, the type of work, what's your day-to-day like?
Okay.
Please.
When we met a year ago, I was the executive director of a small nonprofit arts organization here in Calgary. That's about 40 years old.
Yeah.
And I was not in that position for very long. I was in that position overall for just under 3 years. Then in the summer, I left that position and started off in my new job, which is as a teacher in an elementary school in Calgary here. Also a nonprofit organization, but I'm not running it. I am simply a staff member of it.
Yes.
So it's a big difference from being in charge of an organization, a small one, to working for a larger organization, but still in the exact same sector, the nonprofit sector. One focused in arts and this one focused in education.
Yeah. And so, that sounds fascinating because they're both nonprofits. But as you're saying, because of the size differences and also because of your role, one of it you manage and then the other you are part of a bigger organization. What do you find would be, say, the fun and then the challenges for each of those?
Yeah. What's great about running a small organization is you can sort of run it sort of like a business. I mean, if you have an idea in the morning, you can implement it in the afternoon and find out whether it's working or not by the evening without really asking for permission or, getting a funding or running it past a board of directors. And that was fun. It's working with artists. So our membership was made up of artists, and that is always creative, interesting. You're surrounded by very interesting people who are working to realize their dreams, essentially. And that is a very nice energy to be around.
Yes.
And I guess the pride that I always took was enabling other people to do that. Because as the executive director, you're responsible for making sure there's money and funding and grant applications and donations and sponsors and staff. So your primary job is to allow the organization to function to serve its members. And its members are, creating art.
Yeah.
And so you're creating an environment that allows them to do what they want to do. And that's very rewarding and very exciting. It's frustrating as well when it doesn't happen. But for the most part, those that are doing it are able to do it because somebody is making sure the doors are open and the lights are on and the support is there. Then moving over to school,
right.
I don't have to worry about any of that. I'm on staff, we agreed on my salary, I get paid, and I have just a small portion of what I'm responsible for there, it all fits into the bigger picture, and it's still very creative, but it doesn't have the pressure of making sure the budget is balanced, making sure that, if somebody decides that they are going to move on, it's not my job to worry about it. I don't have to find the replacement. I don't have to keep things going. All of those things that come with running an organization are removed.
So, Barry, it sounds like despite the move of the fields and the nonprofits, it really hovers around the arts and education is what I'm hearing. And by the way, in school you teach drama, you mentioned earlier. Yeah, and so we're talking about surrounded by creativity, as you said, right? People with lots of creative juiciness and all of that. So is this something you've always wanted to do? Like, how did you find about, how did you figure out this is what you want to dedicate yourself to? And what did you do in the beginning of this?
Well, I started off, my university degree, I have a degree in acting, so I started off as an actor. 30 years ago.
You look quite young, by the way.
Yes. But that was, as an actor, I guess, I didn't know it at the time, but I was really interested in telling stories and connecting with people through story somehow. That led to doing some writing, writing fiction, actually going into schools and telling stories to children as a way to try and pay for writing fiction. And then, after I had my first children, who are teenagers now, got to a point where I thought, I need to have a bit more stability financially in my life. And I got a job for the first time in my life in my adult life, working at the Science Center.
Yeah.
They built a new Science Center here. And I was still I was managing the Dome Theater. And I brought very much a storytelling perspective to that. The films that we chose, I was really interested in the films that could tell a story and connect with an audience. And the planetarium shows that we did were very story-based. And then, which is a nonprofit organization, the Science Center here.
Yes.
And from there, I wanted to explore leadership in the arts, and that's where I went to the smaller nonprofit that I was executive director at. And still involved storytelling, but I wasn't doing the storytelling. I was helping to make sure other people could do their storytelling and make their projects that they wanted to make. But then I missed it because that's a very administrative position. And so now working with children, I tell stories every day.
Yeah.
And hopefully the goal is to inspire them to explore their own place in storytelling and how they relate to each other, how they communicate, how they use their imagination. And so, yes, it's always something that I've wanted to do, or in one way or another have been doing my entire adult life.
It sounds like you have been surrounding yourself and then swimming around the creativity in the Calgary scene, mostly in nonprofit, but mostly also, going from a storyteller and then weaving yourself into the leadership, more administrative, managerial type of position to allow others to do their storytelling and creativity, and then finding yourself missing that, so then you decided to go back and be a storyteller yourself.
Yeah.
Wow. So then I'm kind of curious, especially as you move into the leadership and the administrative part of it, what are the things you've learned from storytelling? Because you were talking about how you want to use storytelling to connect people. And then you're talking about how nonprofits can be run like businesses, just with different funding sources.
Yeah.
And so how have you been finding yourself apply what you've learned through storytelling storytelling to the business side of things?
People. It's about connecting with people. And people respond very, very positively to a narrative, to a story. So if you're having a meeting with staff, sharing a story about yourself, reflecting on it, it requires you to be vulnerable. And people love hearing a story. They just do.
Yeah.
Their guard goes down, they stop worrying, and they give over, and they retain. We're just wired that way because it's in our DNA. We've been a species that has been raised on storytelling for 200,000 years. So it's in us. So when it happens today, in a very simple way, and it's just a person speaking to another person or a group of people together in a room without anything else there, it's just, let me tell you what happened. One day I was walking, and we immediately just moved just a little bit closer. Our ears widen a little bit more, and our eyes widen a little bit more, and we like it. We want to find out. And when you have that context going, then a lot of other things can happen in there. You can inspire somebody. And if somebody is inspired, then they want to engage with you and with, let's say, the organization that you are representing. This is what we're all about, and I want you to be excited about it. So let me tell you a story about what happened here. And then that's a great way to do it. And I think connecting people together, that's what these organizations are, is they're humans with a passion and with an idea and with a story to tell.
So let me know if I've heard it right. It's as if you are sensing that because all of us enjoy stories and we're connected because of the stories, and we want to share a part of ourselves. Even in the business side of things, you find yourself able to share this part and, crucially, letting yourself be vulnerable in the process. And that's how you can, I guess, move others.
That's what you're doing. That's what story does. It moves you. And when people are moved, then they're present. It's not what they're doing every day. Something interesting is happening, and then, like I say, then that leads to inspiration, which leads to engagement, which leads to support, sometimes financially or otherwise. Membership. I want to be a part of this, and that is, I think, where the storytelling, those skills, where they come in. It doesn't always work, but a lot of the time, it's a nice way to engage with somebody, I find.
Yes.
For me, it's probably the best way to engage with somebody.
And Barry, this is fascinating, right? You grew up in Calgary, or in southern Alberta. And so you're familiar not just with the nonprofit scene, but also you're fully aware of, what drives Alberta's economy. And so because you have been working in the nonprofits, I wonder how is that interaction of the creativity and being vulnerable in a larger economic drive that can be very business oriented, very profit oriented. How do you maneuver around that? How do you go about with that? Either in funding or the people you meet with locally.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, a for-profit business is in the business of generating revenue, earning money, making money for their shareholders, for themselves. But they also know that they are part of a community, right? And that they're not going to survive if they are not well regarded in that community. So, as much as they're about making money, and that's what they are about, they also, if they're smart, are trying to ensure that their brand is well liked and feels welcome there, because they know that that's going to support their bottom line, right? So in Calgary, traditionally, historically, part of that branding, that sense of this is who this company is. This is a company that supports the arts. So they will fund, in part through a sponsorship, an art form, an arts organization, something that makes them look good, and that they feel that they're engaged in, and that their clients and their community are engaged in, which in turn helps them do the business that they need to do. Especially if their business, as they know, in, let's say, oil and gas, is, takes a huge toll on the place that it's in. Because it's a non-renewable resource, and it's responsible for a lot of pollution and climate problems. And, it's a mess. So they need to counter that with appearing to be, socially responsible and social leaders and artistic champions.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody would deny that, the way that relationship works, it's not ideal, but it's, the arts industry, if you want to call it that, particularly the theater industry in this city, would not be around without that relationship. Or certainly wouldn't be around the way it is now. I don't know if it's necessarily good or the best, but that's, I think, the way it has been.